Hi there, welcome to No Nonsense Whiskey. My name is VinPF, and on today's episode we're doing another unboxing of the Explorer's Whiskey Advent Calendar from Master of Malt. Now, as I've said on the previous videos in this one, there are a couple of different variations of Whiskey Advent Calendars out there right now. This one here is probably one of the cheapest. It's about £100 for the actual set itself. There's a boutique whiskey company one, also done by Master of Malt, that's also £100. Slightly different experiences. That's all kind of like small release, sometimes single cask stuff. This is the Explorer's box, so this is kind of like a worldwide view on whiskies. Not to say that the boutique one isn't, of course, because they take whiskey from all over it as well. So this one really is designed for kind of, I guess, newbies into whiskey, or people looking to expand their palates a little bit more, or try things they wouldn't ordinarily try. Now, this is the fourth video in this little wee series I'm doing right now, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride so far. Obviously, the way I'm doing things here is the small 4-dram tastings rather than daily content. So these tastings have been a little bit odd because Pete has come out first twice on the 3 videos. The last video I did, the 9 to 12 day video, that actually worked out quite well, so hopefully this one will as well. Obviously Master of Malt weren't intending for this to be kind of released like this, so they haven't kind of organised these in little wee tastings in order or anything like that, so we're taking it with a pinch of salt. It is what it is, and we're just going through it to see what we've got. Now, at the end of this whole process, obviously I'm not going through drinking a dram a day on this kind of thing. Hopefully you are too, and you're enjoying this sort of thing. But for me, I'm tipping the rest of these, when I pour these out, into an infinity bottle, as you see here. This is so far, and we'll see how that turns out afterwards. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do that. My intention so far is to release the last video of this tasting set on Christmas Eve, and then do a kind of an impression of this infinity bottle on Christmas Day, obviously filmed in advance, that sort of thing. So I might do it again in a month to see if it's changed a lot. I'm a technician and a scientist as my kind of day job, so my scientific brain tells me that the materials, the whiskey inside here, is fully missable. You know, literally the minute I pour it in there, you know, maybe a few minutes later, up to an hour later, that's going to fully mingle. You know, so I'm not going to be kind of increasing that flavour profile. We tend to get finishes in barrels and things like that because it takes a little bit of time for the oak influence, the wood influence, or whatever was in that wood before to impart itself onto the liquid, rather than having the liquid kind of fully mature together. You know, the actual elements inside this tend to mix pretty quickly. You know, you can always give it a bit of one of these as well. Anyway, the point is, I'm not sure what I'm doing with that. Let's get to this current unboxing and see what we've got. This is days kind of 13 to 16, obviously released on the 16th, so you don't get any spoilers if you're following along. Let's get into it and see what we've got. Now, let's go straight for door number 13. Again, I did look ahead of time this time to see where they were, but, as usual, not that easy to open the doors. Just one of those things. Let's see what we've got for the first one. Okay, we have a Teeling, and it is the Stout Cask Finish. Obviously Irish whiskey, 46%. Haven't covered this one on the channel yet. I've done several Teelings in my time. Most of their kind of... they've got a fancy name for it, but let's just say their core range. Not sure what their plans in the future are, because they've got their own distillery now, but all of this stuff we're tasting now comes from the old Cooley distillery stock. So we'll see how they get on with that. Door number 14 then. Right in the bottom corner. Now, I said I looked up these beforehand, but I've already forgotten where they are. Short-term memory shot. Let's see what we've got in here. Okay, we've got the Glenfiddich. It's the big old title, this, but I always just call it the IPA one. But it's the Experimental Series IPA Cask Finish Single Malt Whiskey, 43%. So far, 46 to 43. This is good because I've covered this one, although it was years ago now, maybe over 3 years ago. So it'll be interesting to try that again and see if my thoughts on that still stand. Because at the time, I remember saying, you know, it's a good whiskey. 45 quid though. It's a good whiskey, but I wish that it had a little bit more IPA in the flavour profile. That's what I remember saying at the time. And I haven't tried it since, so we'll see what happens. What was that? 13, 14, 15 next. Where are you? Hidden by the rocks. Oh, even with big old nails, still. Go on. maybe I'm going about it wrong. I think maybe the technique is wrong. I just need to get my finger right in there. Okay. Oh, so it's simply labelled Rock Island, which I think actually does that a little bit of disservice, because that's obviously a Douglas Laing remarkable regional malt. So that should probably all be on there. Because if you just tried this without doing any research at all, then you probably wouldn't know who made that or anything like that. So that's a blend, 46.8%. It's going to be a little bit smoky. Yes. Now, I have covered this on the channel. I've done all the remarkable regional malts from Douglas Laing, and huge fan of all of them, to be fair. Less interested in the kind of lowland and the Speyside ones. This is the Scallywag and the Epicurean. They're all really good, I have to say, and they're all very good at being indicative of their regions. But me personally, I crave the flavour profiles that come from like the Big P and the Islands one. Obviously, this used to be called the Rock Oyster, but we'll get into that a bit in a little bit later. So last one then is 16, bottom corner, and we're really cooking with gas now. We're getting through these. Still can't get into this thing. Oh, I've just bent my nail as well. Shocking. What I might do, if I remember, I might kind of pre-cut these next time to save that. You know, you're probably getting all kinds of ASMR. What did I just say? Okay, that's weird. I don't know if this has been intentional or not, but this is the remarkable regional malts Scallywag. One of the ones I said I was less interested in. Okay, so again, I mean, this time we've got the symbol on there. Sorry about my lack of autofocus. This is the Speyside one, and I'll have to try and dredge out some memories about what's actually in these things, because they're pretty open about it. It's not like completely open, but they've got like some of the distilleries that are in these things. Yeah, I remember. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I obviously like Speyside whiskey. It smells good, you know, and I remember giving it a positive review. But I think directly after the Rock Island, you know, we might be losing out a little bit. Let's straighten this up, and we'll have a look back at the first dram. Now, again, just for reminders, this is the Teeling Whisky Stout cask finish. Again, I haven't tried this ever before. This is the first time I've tried this. The only time I've ever tried a stout finish was the Jameson's Cask Mates stout finish, and I remember liking that again a lot more over the IPA. So it'd be interesting to try these next to each other, although they're different whiskies, different distilleries. The important thing about this is, if I remember correctly, this is a finished whiskey. Very important. I don't think they hide that. It's on the labels, if I remember, and it's a collaboration with local brewery. They're doing it's exactly the same really as the IPA here. They ship off some whiskey casks to age beer in, and then they ship it back again, and they finish. I don't know what liquid this was or what was in it before. I'm going to guess ex-bourbon. That's a pretty safe bet. And then they finish it for an undetermined amount of time. I'm sure there's information out there about that. Obviously, these things, the way these are, they are not researched at all. I'm just sort of pulling this info. Let's get into a nose and see what we've got then. Ah, fascinating. Okay, my initial impression is obviously very good. Don't get any stout off the nose. But there is something weird about it that in a blind tasting situation, if I didn't know it was stout, it would make me kind of alarm bells. This is something interesting, something different. It's quite it's almost reminded me of like a fizzy sweet, not quite like a Tam Fantastic. You know these Haribo things, these Tam Fantastics with the sugary out like sourness. It's got a fruity element to it. It's almost, I want to say citrusy, but it's not like a kind of fresh acidic citrusy like an orangey or a lemony. It's more like a candied version of it. Okay, let's get onto the palate. Oh, that's beautiful. Really like that. And the spiciness. Usually on whiskies, I get a kind of spice forward. This is spice backwards. So let's have another sip. Wow. Okay. So again, this is one of those whiskies that translates quite nicely from the nose. It's more of those kind of, again, I'm getting just overwhelming sour jelly sweets. You know, like these Haribos, these Tanfaskets. Not sponsored by Haribo at all. I do love those sweets though, and it's very much like that. At the back end, then this kind of spiciness comes out from it. Not quite sure what spice I have to say. It's not quite peppery, but it's not quite kind of cinnamony or anything like that. I'll have to have a bit of a dig, a further dig if I ever reviewed this to pull out proper tasting notes. But as a first impression, really favourable. Don't know where this sits in their price range. Go for another sip. Yeah, I don't know where this sits in their price range, but I have to say that's actually one of the better Teelings I've tried. I'm a big fan of Teeling. Wasn't a big fan of their small batch, I want to say. I'm not sure. I can't remember which order I had them in. But their kind of core range is all lovely. And I've tried a few. Actually, funny enough, I've got another one just sitting right here waiting for me to do something with it. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. This is the Brabazon. I still don't know how to pronounce that. Brabazon Bottling Series 3. No idea about that at all. But I've got stuff everywhere. Let's have a sip of water and we'll move on to the next one. Obviously, these next three I have reviewed before. Now, because I've reviewed these, I'm not going to go into kind of really heavy tasting notes on these. If you want to see more about each one, then please feel free to check out those videos. But what I'm going to do here is just kind of give you my impressions of them now. You know, it's been a couple of years since I covered a few of these things, and I'll have to kind of remember what I said about them back in the day. But I'll give you just some first impressions, I think. So the next one is the Glenfiddich IPA cask. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, although I think I reviewed it favourably at least, you know, like I tend to do this kind of, is the value there? That's really been my ethos all throughout, although that's kind of come more to the forefront these days. Back then, I probably would have said that I'm not sure if this is really worth the £45 asking price. I don't know if this is still that same asking price, but we'll see what I think about that when we get into it. And as I mentioned earlier as well, the thing I said I didn't like about this was that I felt that the IPA influence wasn't prevalent enough, and it was just kind of, for me, just another whiskey, a very nice whiskey, albeit. This is exactly the same as that kind of stout edition thing. This is an ex-whiskey barrel that's been sent off to be, had beer aged in it, and then it's been sent back. It's a local collaboration. I think during my video I went into in depth and I put up some infographics and things like that. Whew, nice smoke and mirrors. Let's get onto the nose and see what we've got. Yeah, so same. I mean, like I'm often quite critical of Spacesides, and I don't mean that to be like a negative. I always try to say this. It's just not the flavour profiles that I'm after. I'm after kind of big, punchy, bold flavours these days. As a fan of whiskey, but as a reviewer of whiskey, I try to be kind of objective about these things and try and pull out what everyone else might smell. For me, it's that kind of standard Speyside nose. It's lots of orchard fruits like apples and pears, some honeys and some vanillas from the ex-bourbon barrels, that sort of thing. Very typical, kind of Scotchy nose. Let's say it's not a very good note, I know, but it's, you know, that kind of. If you like Scotch whiskey, you're gonna like this, I think. But as I said earlier, I don't really get much IPA in this. You know, when I think of IPA, obviously IPA is a broad spectrum, but I'm thinking about kind of hoppiness and extra citrusy elements, the things I really like in my favourite IPAs. But a nice nose nonetheless. Let's get onto the palate. Yeah. I mean, it's got a kind of weird tanginess on the back end. I would say it's same with the stout one. You can definitely tell that something's not usual about this. But as a fan of IPAs, I'm not immediately hit in the face with this is something IPA. If this was a blind tasting, I would not be like, yep, I'm getting that as an IPA. Therefore, the IPAs that I know about might be Glenfiddich, that kind of thing. That thought process wouldn't be happening. I would just be like, there's something strange about this, something different about this. Can't quite put my finger on it. Let's have another sip. Yeah, and it is a tasty whiskey. It's one of those whiskies that I wouldn't bother keeping it. I wouldn't bother keeping it like special in here. It isn't one of those. It's just a generally easy drinking whiskey. You can put it at the front of your collection. Whenever you fancy just a nice, easy drinking evening whiskey, then this is that. It's not going to be challenging. It has got something slightly different about it. So if you've only really drank Space Oddity whiskies before and you're looking to kind of push out into different flavour profiles, this would be a nice, easy stepping stone into that. But, you know, in terms of the Glenfiddich experimental series, personally, I still think the XX, the 20, is a better whiskey, albeit a slightly different story. You know, that one there is like, the story behind that is that 20 of the ambassadors for Glenfiddich were allowed to pick any cask they wanted from the warehouse, wherever they were in Scotland, and they picked those, blended them together, and then the master blender has created a similar tasting whiskey, nosing whiskey to those 20 casks. So you have to be careful about that knowledge, because it isn't the result of those 20 casks being combined. It's samples from those casks to create a flavour profile, to then have their blenders match that flavour profile consistently throughout the releases. Getting a bit sidetracked by that one, but that's the difference between the two. I still think that's a better whiskey though. It's got some extra elements into it, like I know there's a port pipe barrel whiskey thing in there somewhere as well. Moving on. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. Moving on. That's in order of preference so far, Teeling and then IPA. So next one then, we've got the two Douglas Langs. The Rock Island used to be called Rock Oyster. I spoke to Douglas Laing about this, and they literally only changed it because they were getting feedback, rightly or wrongly, that the word oyster is quite divisive. Like, you either love oysters or you hate them. Personally, I hate them, but I know that there's no oystery elements to this. It was an interesting name. It kind of set it apart, but the island, I guess, kind of really hits home the region of this, which is a bit strange, because apart from the Big Pete, the rest of them just have interesting names without, like the Scallywag, good example. I don't know, it's about a dog, but what relevance it has to Space Side, I don't know. Anyway, this one here, so it differentiates itself from the Big Pete, because Big Pete is solely a blend of Islay whiskies. This one does have some Islay in it. Don't know which ones. The way that they announce what's in this is they tell you what islands that they've taken whiskey from, and you'll see what I mean, where you can have a good guess. So they've got some Islay in here. Now, personally, from my knowledge of whiskey, it's a good bet it's Camellia, mainly because there aren't many whiskies out there that take whiskies from other places on Islay. It's possible, it does happen, but when you have an unknown Islay distillery as part of a blend, a betting man would always put their money on Camellia, because it's better than even odds, let's say. Next is Isle of Arran. At the moment, there's only 2 distilleries on there, and one of them's only putting whiskies that would kind of go anywhere near something like this. The Isle of Arran distillery. Obviously, they have Lag now as well, but that's not quite ready to start putting into blends. Then they have Jura. Well, you're only really going to get the Jura distillery in that right now. And then finally, we've got Orkney. So there's 2 on there, as far as I know. You've got the Scapa, which I have never heard of them putting into a blend. It could happen, but I haven't heard of it. Probably likely to be Highland Park. There you go. So the only one we don't really know is the Islay one, but I don't think that really matters. Let's get onto the nose and see what we've got. Yes. See, this is what I'm talking about, like, versus the other. This is the kind of flavours that I'm looking for. Now, it is obviously quite peaty. It isn't as peaty as the Big Pete. So if you're looking for something that's not quite kind of full peat, then, you know, look for something like this. But what we're talking about is, like, yes, it's smoky, but it isn't ashy, it isn't medicinal. It's quite salty, it's a lot of sea air, kind of briny elements going on. For me, it's like barbecued meats a little bit, maybe some kind of salmon-y elements, you know, that kind of sea salty, fishy. I don't want to say fishy because that gives a kind of negative element to it, like if you smelt some, like a fish market, that kind of thing. It's not a particularly nice nose, but it's nice in this, is what I'm trying to say. Really nice. Let's get onto the palate. Now, interestingly, it develops a little bit on this. Like, it's not a high impact whiskey until you've swallowed your dram, and then you get some ashiness coming out of this. It isn't like a Lagavulin or a Lefroy ashiness. It's just an ever so slight waft of smoke, like towards the end of a bonfire, when the kind of, you know, the white bits of the wood are starting to kind of come off with the smoke a little bit. That kind of smell you're getting. But imagine that on the seaside. That's the kind of vibe we're going for here. Let's say bonfire on the seaside. Beautiful. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a while, and if you have, then thank you. You'll know that out of the remarkable regional malts, this is probably my favourite. Like, I often favourite the Big Peat because huge peaty flavours, but as a general sipping whiskey, and sometimes I don't fancy the peat as much, at least anyway, this is superb. One of my absolute favourites, and it's so cheap. It's less than 40 quid usually. I don't know if it's that sort of price at the moment, but an absolute go-to for me. I would highly recommend the Rock Island if you're any way interested in some smoky whiskey. Big bold words. Now, finally then, the Scallywag. Now, I've tried to have a good rinse, but I'm expecting some lows after this, unfortunately, but that's just maybe me. You know, it smells good. I have to say, it smells good, which is interesting because so they don't tell us all of the distilleries in this. This is again another remarkable regional malts. This is the Scallywag, the Speyside one. The 3 distilleries they do disclose are, trying to pull this out of my memory, it's Macallan, Glenrothes, and some Mortlach, I want to say. And I have to say, those 3 distilleries I have had fairly bad experiences in my personal flavour profile, because these 3 tend to sherry their whiskies a lot. You know, the casks they use are heavily sherried, and they like to put that straight into their whiskies. I often get sulphury notes off of all 3 of those. That's not to say that all of their whiskies are like that. The Glenrothes specifically, I've had some good and some bad, so I don't tend to buy them. Macallan, I very rarely get on with one of their bottles, I have to say. Unpopular opinion, I know. And Mortlach, I always find them a little bit much. Not in terms of price, just like, I don't know, whatever's going on in the mouth, I always find it a bit much. But I reviewed this very favourably, I think. So let's get into those and see what we've got. Now, it's clearly a sherried whiskey, I have to say. Kind of apt at Christmas time. And there are some kind of sulphury, gunpowdery notes at the back, but they're really low. I think that hopefully that's me kind of changing over the years, but I imagine it's just really blended well. I can pick it out and it doesn't offend me, which it usually does. You know, when sulphur gets in my nose, it really detests me, but let's get onto the palate and see if that's any different. So, really nice actually, I have to say. It's there's no sulphur there for me at all. Lots of things you'd expect from sherried whiskey. Those kind of dried fruits, raisins, sultanas, those kinds of things. You know, some people say things like Christmas cake, but with Christmas cake, obviously you're getting a heavy brandy influence, and you don't really get that on some of these whiskies. Definitely not this one. There's a kind of light spiciness on the back end. I want to say kind of a cinnamony vibe to that. And the finish is actually like quite large, quite spicy, quite fruity, a bit drying on the back end, a bit sour on the back end. But I've often said that's not a negative tasting note. That just makes me want to drink a bit more of it. So yeah, I mean, strangely, well, probably not strangely enough, I have to say, the IPA comes in last for me this time. Then the Scallywag. Tough actually. I'm gonna have to say that the Teeling's second place and the Rock Island wins out for me, just purely on that mouth feel. It's just exactly what I'm looking for in a daily sipping whiskey. Now that's been my 4th video. We're well over halfway now. We have 2 videos left, obviously coming out in 4 days apart. We've got another one coming out weekend coming up, and then another one on Christmas Eve. Hopefully you'll enjoy these things in the future as well. If you end up getting something like this, you want to taste through it. Again, do let me know what your thoughts are about these little wee videos. Obviously this is weird content in terms of what I normally do, the reviews, but hopefully you're enjoying this change in pace, these slightly longer videos, and I mentioned on social media as well, apologies if you've been catching adverts in between these videos, because my usual video is about less than 8 minutes. YouTube has a kind of weird thing right now where if your video is over 8 minutes, it automatically puts mid-roll ads throughout. So if you do see those mid-roll ads in any of my videos, please do comment and let me know, because it's just a simple case of me forgetting to go and find that checkbox and turning it off. Because I personally really hate mid-roll ads. I think that they impact negatively on your viewer experience. That's my personal opinion. More power to anyone else who wants to do it, but for me, they're an accident if you see them, and please do tell me if you do, because I want them gone from my channel. So yeah, hopefully you're enjoying these videos. We've got 2 more left, plus the final tasting of these together in the infinity bottle. I'm going to chuck them in here. I'm expecting something weird with this because we've got a lot of weird flavour profiles going on here, mixed in with kind of typical stuff. So we'll see what happens at the end of it. I'll catch you again on more reviews and another one, at least 2 more of these, in the future. Thanks for watching today's video. It was made with generous support from Patreon supporters like these top tier people scrolling across the screen right now.